Okay, well, I think we're going to get started with our final Sunshine Week webinar. So welcome to the Rhode Island Department of State's Sunshine Week webinar series. I'm Jess Signa, and I'm the Rhode Island Department of State's Director of Data Analysis, and I'll be emceeing and presenting these webinars throughout this past week. The mission of the Rhode Island Department of State under Secretary of State Greg M. Amori is to serve Rhode Islanders by promoting transparent government, supporting businesses, and strengthening our democracy through a commitment to civic engagement, secure elections, and empowering voters. We have so many tools here at the Rhode Island Department of State to accomplish this mission and make government more accessible to Rhode Islanders, and we're really excited to share them with you throughout this Sunshine Week. So just before we begin, a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded and we'll share it with everyone who's registered, and we'll also be putting it on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to use the closed captioning, there are CC buttons either at the top or the bottom of your screen, and you can click on those to configure it to your needs. And then finally, if you have any questions for me or for our speaker today, feel free to throw those in the chat and we will answer them live or in the chat, but either way, we definitely will get you an answer today. So everyone thinks about elections when they think about the Rhode Island Department of State. We have an election happening right now. However, the Rhode Island Department of State provides considerable resources and supports for Rhode Island's businesses, community. Today's workshop will provide an overview of the Rhode Island Business Data Hub, which is a collection of interaction tools to explore business data collected by the Rhode Island Department of State. This workshop will cover how to use the corporate database to find details about particular businesses or nonprofits as well. So we have with us Kristen Cordero, who is the Deputy Director of Business Services. I'll turn it over to her now. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you so much, Jess. Hi, everyone. As Jess said, my name is Kristen, and I am with our Business Services Division here at the Secretary of State's office. Just going to take a moment to share my screen so you can see what we're going to be working with today. And as Jess mentioned, we're going to be talking about corporate data, business data. We have a lot of it. We have a lot of different varieties of data, different flavors. I kind of want to give you a background of what we do and do not collect, so you can have a sense of the kind of data that we can provide. And then we'll walk through the ways that you can access that data. And there's a lot of different channels, one of which is the Data Hub, which we'll spend some time walking through, but there are other options as well. So as Jess said, if you have any questions while I'm going through some of these options for you, please feel free to pipe up in the chat, and we are happy to kind of take it in a different direction depending on what questions you may have. So the Business Services Division operates the state's business registry, meaning nearly every business that is conducting business in the state is going to be registered with our division. This does not currently include sole proprietorships. So if you've ever heard somebody saying that they are a DBA, right? I am Kristen Cordero, DBA, Kristen's Handyman Services. I'm a sole proprietorship. You will not find data about my business here in the corporate record with the Secretary of State's office. If I am operating an LLC, a corporation, a nonprofit, a workers cooperative, a benefit corporation, a limited partnership, a limited liability partnership, all of those entities, if they are conducting business in the state of Rhode Island, should be registered with our office, and we will have a record of them. So as you can probably imagine, that's quite a few businesses. I would imagine that's what's coming to your mind. Now, that's true. We have a lot of data, and it is 100% accessible. Okay, we do not have any records of any business that has ever registered with us that you cannot access on your own for free. Now, I do want to be very clear about the type of information that we collect. So we have a web page here that's devoted to that very topic, because it can get a little confusing, right? When you're thinking about information about a business, you might be looking for different things. You could be looking for information about how they conduct their business. Are they reputable? Should you trust them, right? You could be looking for ownership information. Is this a woman-owned business? Is this business owner also the owner of 15 other businesses in the state? Is this an LLC? I've heard a lot about LLCs. How do I find out how many LLCs there are? Some of these questions we can answer, others we cannot. What we collect when we are registering a business or a nonprofit is information about that business itself. So it's fairly limited, it's helpful, it's really legally valuable, but it does not include ownership information or demographic information. So you're never going to go into our database, search for a business, and see the name of the owner or owners, their home address, their phone number, their email address. You will see the full legal name of the business, any other names that it goes by, when it first was allowed to conduct business in the state, its status, meaning has it done what it has needed to do every year to maintain good standing in the state? You will also see its mailing address. You will see the industry that it conducts business in. You will see the type of corporate structure that that business chose, meaning it's an LLC, it's a partnership, it's a nonprofit, etc. And you will also see the name and address of the point of contact for legal service of process. All very important things if you are working with a business, but it is very important that you understand that we are not an investigative division. We do not enforce any professional licensing. We do not provide any professional licensing. We are a corporate registry. If somebody is looking to create a new business and actually create a corporate entity, they do that by filing with us. The other things they do, conducting business ethically, making sure that they are following the regulations for their given profession, all of those are governed by other state agencies and by civil law. So this page here kind of lays out in broad terms the type of information that our data can provide, which again, can be really valuable, but it is important to understand that it's not a catch-all of every possible piece of information about every possible business in the state. I do want to show you what it looks like when you look at a business's record. So we have on our website a corporate database. You'll see I just clicked a link. I didn't have to log in or prove that I deserve to look at this information. I am just an average person. I can click this link, and through this database, I have access to the record of every business that has ever registered with the state, dating back to the 1700s. And not only do I have access to information about that business, I also have access to a physical, a PDF file stamped copy of every document they have ever filed with us. So that could be, hundreds of years of annual filings with us. All of those will be accounted for in this database. All you need to do if you're looking for a particular business is to search by entity name. I also want to pause and let you know that while you absolutely can use this system by yourself, it's pretty user friendly. There's a lot of bells and whistles that you can play with. If you're ever struggling to find a specific entity, all you need to do is contact us and we will be happy to help you. We are available by phone, by email, in person, very responsive, and we're happy to help. So please do use our division as a resource if you're trying to find information about a particular entity. So when you're in the corporate database, you can look for records of one individual entity at a time. This is not an amalgamation of all businesses. We'll get to that. But this is a way to sort of dive deep into the record of one particular entity at a time. So I just want to show you an example of what it looks like when you do that. So I will show you just for fun because we love history the records of our oldest entity on the books, okay? I searched for the business name. When I click on it, I come to the entity summary. This is all the most up-to-date information we have about this business. You can see that it's a nonprofit. You can see when it first formed back in 1741. You can see its current address. You can see how to serve legal service of process on this entity. You can see any other name it ever registered with us. So some of these they registered and then decided not to use anymore. Some of them might still be current. There could be 50 or 100 names on here, and they will all be encompassed in this one record. For things like nonprofits and corporations, you can also find information about any officers or directors of that entity. Again, these are not necessarily owners because we don't collect ownership information, but you absolutely can find officer information if that information is required as part of the registration process. You'll also see for every entity in our records, there's going to be this fun little number here that's called a NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System. This is a code that is required every time a business files an annual report. And what it does is it's a centralized number, a standard number that tells everyone what industry your business or nonprofit is doing the most work in, your primary purpose, right? So for this entity, excuse me, you can see that it's a social advocacy organization, right? There are numbers for manufacturing, there are numbers for restaurants, there are numbers even deeper down for um, uh, beds and breakfasts and fast food service restaurants and quick service restaurants and fine dining. There's a number for every one of those. And when we get to talking about the data hub, you'll see how that plays into taking all of this data, all of this massive amount of data on all of these entities, 100,000 plus active entities, and compiling this industry information so we can get a better sense of what our businesses are up to here in the state. This is the summary screen, right? I can also look at, as I said, a PDF copy of every filing that this entity has ever submitted, dating all the way back to their date of incorporation. So obviously, all of our businesses are not several centuries old, but for ones that even registered last year, you will see a PDF file stamped copy of exactly what that entity filed with us, and that's a permanent public record, free and available to you at all times. The summary screen is always updated with the most up-to-date information, but you can always find a record of everything that this entity has ever filed with us. Can be really useful for business owners themselves because they have free access to a copy of everything they filed for evidence, right? But also if you're looking into the history of a certain entity, you want to learn more about it, how it has changed over the years, you have free and fair and full access to that information at the tip of your fingers just through this corporate database. Lots you can do with this. I could probably spend an hour on it, but I won't because we're really here to talk about Data Hub. One other thing I want to mention is we also offer for free something called a new entity listing. You can get to it right here from Quick Links. And every week there is a file generated and posted to this website that has a list of all new businesses that have registered in the last week, and that is 6 months at a time. So you can see every week how many and what those businesses were that registered for the last 6 months. And that, again, is free, available to download. There is no subscription required for that. Okay. I want to get to the meat of what we're talking about today, which is this truly amazing little tool we have called the Rhode Island Business Data Hub. And this is a way for us to take all of that information in that corporate database, right? Imagine you want to just sit back and think from 30,000 feet. I just kind of want to see what the business landscape is like. I'm interested in what the most popular industries are. And within that, are those all LLCs? Are they corporations? What are nonprofits doing in the state? How can I tell if I'm a new or prospective business owner if I have a gap in the market that I want to fill? And these are all questions that can be answered with our data without having to go into each and every one of those 100,000 entities records and research them, right? Jess did an amazing job and continues to do an amazing job developing this data hub. What this does is it takes all that data. Jess works with it. She cleans it up because it's not always the neatest thing. When you think about zip codes and addresses, things can get a little messy, and Jess does amazing work streamlining all of that to make it make sense. And it takes all of that data and it feeds it into these 5 different interactive visualizations, each of which does a different thing for you based on what kinds of questions you want to answer or what you're interested in. So I'm going to take you through what each of these do. Again, if you have any questions, absolutely ask away. This tool was launched back in May of 2019. It's continually updated ever since then. We're also always open for feedback. So while I did go over at the beginning of this workshop the limitations on the kind of data we do collect, if there's a thing that you're interested in or a question that burns at you that you think we can answer through a visualization like one of these, we really want to hear about it. We really want to make sure that we are creating and publishing tools that are useful not just for Rhode Islanders, not just for policymakers and reporters, but for anybody that might want to look at what the state of Rhode Island is doing in terms of its business landscape. And that's an accidental excellent segue into the very first visualization here that we'll go over, which is called Rhode Island's Business Landscape. Jessica built these tools using Power BI. So when I open each of them, you'll see them load, and then you will see all of the information pop up with a bunch of different options here. And you can manipulate all of this to your needs. So this first one we're looking at, it is called the business landscape. And that is because, as I mentioned, right, this is really if you're looking for that 30,000 foot view. I really want to know what industries are really popular in the state, right? Maybe I am trying to market my services, or maybe I'm looking to fill a gap, or maybe I'm looking for competition, or maybe I am looking to craft policies, right? Maybe I'm looking to gear grant money or funding towards certain industries, and I want to see how many businesses are actually participating in those industries, and of those businesses, what type of structure do they have and where are they located? This does all of that for you. And as I said, it's interactive, right? So we're looking at for-profit entities only. We will talk in a little bit about nonprofit options that we have. There's a whole separate section where we look at nonprofit information, as it's just a whole different can of worms, a different category than these for-profit businesses, different industries, different structures. So for-profit businesses, you'll see that everything is as of the fourth quarter. The information in this, fourth quarter of 2023, I should say, everything in this visualization is updated on a quarterly basis. Jessica does a lot of work, as I said, to clean up the data and make it make sense in order to feed into a visualization like this so that it's accurate, it's interactive, it's telling you what you need to know. So an update to this, obviously, for the first quarter information will be forthcoming soon, but it is faithfully updated on a quarterly basis. You'll see filters on the left. If you would rather work with drop downs and checkboxes, you have these options. If you just want to look at information on businesses in a certain industry, I just want to see what's going on with construction businesses. You'll see everything else changes, okay? I just get this big yellow square for construction because that's all I care about. I can see how many for-profit businesses total have indicated that their primary industry is construction. And then from there, I can see how many of those are LLCs, how many of them are corporations, how many of them are domestic and foreign. And what that means, domestic and foreign, for anyone not familiar, a domestic means they are based here in Rhode Island. They first formed here in Rhode Island. Foreign means they exist anywhere else. It could be Massachusetts, it could be Idaho, it could be Germany, and they're also doing business here in Rhode Island. All of these businesses are qualified to conduct business here, but that terminology just indicates where they are based out of. So you can also filter it by if I just care about what's going on in Rhode Island, right? I can either select here, I can select here. I just want to see what's going on in Providence. I can do that and I can see how many of those are LLCs, how many of those are corporations, how many of those are domestic and foreign, and so on. If I clear those filters, I want to go again. I can look at, let's see, just healthcare, right? I can click here. Now it's showing me just information on healthcare businesses. I can see how many they are, what structures they have, and where they are located. Really great if you are looking at the landscape of industries and types of business structures in the state. And you saw I didn't have to log into this. I didn't have to get out and go back in, change my mind on what I'm looking for. Entirely interactive. You can do with it what you will. I do want to mention on a lot of these visualizations, you will see a not yet reported status, and I just want to make clear what that means. This is essentially businesses that have just registered, have not yet filed their first annual report, so they haven't had to tell us yet which industry they're in. So at registration, the statute is really clear about what information we have to collect and we can collect, and that industry is not one of those pieces of information. Add to that that many businesses that are first registering aren't exactly sure what their primary moneymaker is going to be. So when they file their first annual report, that filing that's due with us every year, that is their first opportunity to tell us what it is that they are doing. And from there, that information gets fed into here through that NAICS code that we talked about. So these not yet reported entities, they will be reported once we update it for the first quarter of 2024. But that's what that means when you see it. It doesn't mean that they are mystery businesses that will never have to tell us what they're doing. It just means they are young enough that they have not yet had to tell us that information, but will have to do so soon. Okay. I don't see any questions so far. I see accolades, which is great, which is great. But I don't see any questions so far on this visualization. So I'll move on to the next. But again, if you do have any questions or you're thinking, can I use this to accomplish X, Y, Z? Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. And if the answer is no, is that because it's never able to happen or because we haven't built it yet? Who knows? So let's talk about it. Okay. This is another visualization available in the hub, and this one is called Find Your Market. Okay, this is really ideal for business owners themselves to use. Of course, anybody can use it, but the purpose, our intention for creating this one was to allow someone to compare between municipalities how many businesses are registered in certain industries. Our vision for this is that somebody doing market research, somebody trying to figure out, I have this great business idea. I want to make sure that I'm not in a saturated market. I want to make sure that I can find my niche and that I can find my customer because I am unique, right? This allows you to compare between each city or town, two at a time, how many businesses in each of these industries are located in that city or town. So if I am trying to open a bed and breakfast, I have a couple locations in mind and I'm comparing the two, right? Let's just go through this scenario. Bed and breakfast, I am thinking maybe I'll do Portsmouth if my computer will. There we go. Maybe I'll do Portsmouth or maybe I will do Newport, right? They're close by. They both have bustling tourism markets. I think I'm going to get some customers that way. Okay. I am also interested in this industry. There's sub industries as well. I can go right down to beds and breakfasts if I want. Or let's say I am going to do a hotel, or let's say I'm going to do a restaurant. I can really drill down here. So let's look at everything in this category for Portsmouth and everything in this category for Newport. You probably saw, if you were paying attention, the numbers switched really fast. So what we are looking at right now is all businesses with a principal place of business in Portsmouth that report themselves as having bed and breakfast as their primary industry, a bar as a primary industry, a hotel, a limited service, a full service restaurant, and the same exact information for Newport. So if I have a bed and breakfast in mind, right, I see that there are two in Portsmouth and there are 12 in Newport. Maybe that makes me lean toward Portsmouth because I don't have as much competition. There's clearly a little bit of desire for it because two already exist, but I don't have to worry about having so many competitors. That is the ultimate goal of this tool, is to allow anybody really, but particularly business owners, to do that kind of free market research that they otherwise would have to seek out professionals for, right? We never want to discourage anybody from finding professional help, from getting mentoring, but a lot of people like to do this work on their own. When you're starting a new business, funds are not always immediately available. And this is a way for us to make our data as useful as we possibly can for people just trying to get a sense of what it looks like out there without having to go into that corporate database and search for that bed and breakfast NAICS code, find them all, sort by municipality, figure out where they're located, do research into each individual one, right? I can certainly still do that, but this gives me a higher level, easy to use way to find that information out in just a couple of clicks. Okay. I can also, I'm not sure exactly when this would be most useful, but I can compare a particular municipality versus all of Rhode Island, right? So if I am just interested in beds and breakfasts, I can compare how many of them are in Rhode Island as a whole, excuse me, as opposed to how many are in Portsmouth. Okay. So that's the Find Your Market tool. Again, it's infinitely configurable. You can remove the filters, start over. You can find all sorts of different industries if you're going back and forth between them. Or maybe you are interested in marketing your business's services to a certain type of industry. You can find out how many of them are in certain locations. Another piece of data available through this visualization is census data, and this is again updated as soon as the Census Bureau updates their information. It is updated here as well. It's a little less frequently than quarterly. They have a lot of data they're working with, but when the new version does come out, Jessica does her thing to incorporate that into here. But when I am selecting different municipalities, this updates as well. So if I want to compare, again, Portsmouth to Newport, right? I looked at my industries, but I can also look at the unemployment rate, the median household income, the education level. So again, if I'm thinking about marketing my services to a certain customer, I can help find that customer by using this tool based on where I am located and where I might want to divert my marketing dollars. Okay, great. We will move on to the next one. So I mentioned that we have specific information for nonprofits. So let's talk about that. This will probably look pretty familiar to you, especially if you were paying attention during the Rhode Island business landscape visualization section. This is essentially the two visualizations we just went through, the business landscape for for-profit businesses and that find your market information specifically for nonprofit entities. As I mentioned, the industry categories, the type of work that nonprofits do is really very different from for profit businesses. They have a whole separate category of types of services they provide. So these are distilled in one separate section because a nonprofit landscape truly does look different than a for-profit landscape. You got a lot of different things going on, not as many structures, right? You're really looking at nonprofits, but what they do varies from what businesses do. Not always, but usually. So as I mentioned, this is very similar to the two that you just saw, but it is for nonprofits. So that find your market piece, right? If you want to compare what nonprofits are doing in certain municipalities, you do the same exercise that I just did. So I want to compare what's going on with nonprofits in Barrington versus East Providence. fun neighbors, right? Things look a little different. And from there, I can filter depending on what industry I'm looking at, either through this drop down, or I can also click on these options here. If I just want to see child and youth services, right, I can do that and it will tell me exactly how many there are. Um, okay. This also contains that census data that we talked about for the very same reason. If somebody is looking to target information or marketing or PSAs to certain industries, they can find where nonprofits operating in those industries are concentrated. The other piece of this nonprofit report visualization, if you click this button here, you go to essentially that landscape visualization for nonprofits, right? So you have a total number of nonprofits, active nonprofits registered with the state. You can see if they are domestic, based here in Rhode Island, or foreign. You can see where they are located by their mailing address. You can filter just as I did before, and you can also select by industry. So if I just want to see how many of them are in this industry, I can do so, and it'll change all of this information for me, just like it did on the for-profit page. Okay. And then if I wanted to go back to that Find Your Market tool for nonprofits, just click right back here, and it'll take me to that page we were just on. So everything nonprofit compiled in this one visualization, because it really is a different animal and it deserves its own section, its own information. It's not apples to apples when you're talking about nonprofits versus for profit businesses. Okay, let's go back. We are getting close to showing you everything. The next one we're going to go over is Survey Says, and I want you to forget everything I said at the beginning of this workshop, about what kind of information we collect. Now, you'll probably remember I mentioned we don't collect ownership information, we don't collect demographic information. This is true. However, it's a question that we are asked very frequently. It is a data point that makes sense to ask about. It's something that, adds value to the conversation about policymaking, about what's going on out there in the world of businesses and nonprofits. We are doing our best to make an effort to collect this information. But remember, what we do here in the business services division with the business registry, it is governed by state law. Our responsibilities are really clearly outlined in that law, and there are some restrictions on the type of information that we can require at registration, including ownership information, including demographic information, including information about employees and income, and volunteers in the case of nonprofits, and where funding comes from in the case of nonprofits. That's not information that we are statutorily required to collect. So what we have done, because that information is really important, it can tell you a lot, is every time a business or a nonprofit files an annual report with our office, which is required by statute, they are also asked to complete a survey. The survey is voluntary. Again, we can't require it. We very much appreciate the businesses and nonprofits who do report on that survey. However, it is not a 100% response rate. So the information you see on this visualization is based on the information that has been voluntarily given to us. It is not a full accurate picture of the responses of every business registered in the state. In fact, you can see about 29,000 entities, for-profit entities, excuse me, responded to the survey at the last time that we had the annual reports in 2023. We have about 90,000 or so for-profit entities in the state. So you're looking at about a third of the responses here. It definitely tells you something, right? There is definitely information here that is valuable, but I just want to be clear that this shouldn't be taken as representative of every business in the state, because it just simply is not, since this information is not required. Doing our best to be helpful, but we can only go so far. So what this does is it lays out the questions we ask on that survey. This is the one for for-profit entities, where we ask the filer of the annual report to self-identify if they are a woman-owned or minority-owned or veteran-owned business. So you can see the responses here, right? Of the entities that responded to the survey, 28% of them indicate that they are woman-owned. This does not mean that they are certified through the state as woman-owned, but it does mean that the business is identifying themselves as a woman-owned business. Same for a minority-owned business or a veteran-owned business. We also ask if they are disabled-owned. That's another question on the annual report survey. There are also questions relating to the revenue and the employees, and all of these are interactive. So if I'm just interested in how many women-owned businesses have 0 employees, right? That's this color, I can see that. 45% of the total, 4,611 women-owned, self-identified women-owned businesses that responded to the survey report having 0 employees. How many report having 6 to 50 employees? About 1,000. So you can play around with this information. You can also use the filters over here. This same information or a version of it is available for nonprofits as well. So if you click on the nonprofit section here, we ask similar questions. There is no ownership in a nonprofit, it does not work that way. So the questions relate more to who is doing the work for the nonprofit and where their funding is coming from. So how many are reporting receiving the majority of their funding from donations, from fundraising, from grants, or from fees for their service, membership fees, and etc. Also, how many employees, how much they made in the previous year of gross revenue, and the number of volunteers. So let's say I want to know how many organizations that, were funded mostly from state grants, right? Have 6 to 50 volunteers. I can see that there are 366 of them, right? So it's giving me percentages, it's giving me all sorts of information. And again, I can configure this to my needs. I would just want to reiterate this information is only as good as the information provided by business owners and nonprofit members. We really encourage the folks who file with us to fill out that survey and to be honest on that survey. I should also note the survey itself is not imaged as part of the record in the corporate database, but it does feed into this data hub. So you will not find a record at the entity level of how many employees they have, how much gross revenue they have received, but it does give a sense of the bigger picture through this visualization. Okay, there are other places to go for overarching landscape, kind of 30,000 foot data on employment and income and revenue and nonprofit information from various sources all around the state, the federal government. There is no one central place to look, but we are doing our best to kind of make a little bit of sense for folks that are already here accessing our data and expecting some of this ancillary information. Okay. The last one I will go over with you today is this one called the daily numbers. This is the one that I use most frequently just because of the nature of my work. And what's very cool about this one is updated daily. So all the other ones we looked at are updated quarterly. As I said, Jessica has to do a fair amount of cleaning up of the data, making sure that it fits neatly into these visualizations so the information is accurate when you're interacting with them. This one is updated every morning. So you can see we are looking at all numbers as of yesterday here. And what this visualization does is it tells you how many new businesses are registering, how many of them are still active, what types of businesses they are, and when in the month they incorporated. So as the year goes on, you will see this section fill in. It'll be January, February, March, all the way through December. I can click on any one of these bars to see, let's see, in January, we saw quite a few registrations, right? I can see which types of businesses they all were. How many of them were Rhode Island based? How many of them were foreign? How many of them were LLCs? How many of them were LLPs? How many of them were corporations? Same for nonprofits. If I'm interested in nonprofit data, I can see how many registered in January as a foreign nonprofit or as a domestic nonprofit. Um, I can also see information from many, many years past. So if I want to do uh, a comparison of how many new businesses have been registering year over year, um, I can absolutely do that here. And that is a question we get asked an awful lot. So I am very happy to have this tool. It is something that feeds a lot into policy decisions and reporting. So things you see on the news about new business registrations, they're getting that data from us. And this is a really easy way for those comparisons to be made without having to pull all the data, go through spreadsheets, organize things, do calculations. It does it all for you. So if I am trying to compare, excuse me, year over year, this data goes back to 1990. I know in our corporate database, I showed you records dating back to the 1700s. Because new business structures have become available over the years, particularly like an LLC was not a thing back in 1700s. It is a huge thing now, and it's far and away the most popular business structure. Um, if we go way, way back before LLCs were a thing, our numbers are not going to match up. It's not going to make any sense, and that data is not easily digitized. So 1990 is the furthest back you can go in this visualization. It tells you a lot from almost 35 years ago, but if you are ever looking for deeper information, for information further back, we still have access to that data. We can do the work to get it for you. I think for policymaking and for educational purposes, 1990 is ages ago for the kind of decision making that needs to be done now. So let's just look, for the sake of things, at data from 1990. Okay. So in 1990, you can see how many businesses registered by month, how many nonprofits registered by month, what type of business they were. You can also see how many of them are still active today. I can do the same thing for 10 years later, and I can compare. Oh, look, we're getting some more every year. More of them are still active. I'm going to go another decade forward, even more every year, right? Now, let's look just for fun at 2019, before some things happened in the world that changed the way that business registrations happen. I'm sure many of you saw during the early days of the pandemic, or I guess during the early years of the pandemic, that a lot of new businesses were forming. States all over the country were seeing massive increases in how many new businesses were forming, and questions were going left and right about what are these businesses doing? What types are they? Who's owning these businesses? What are they doing? Are they still around? This helps answer those questions. So 2019, before things happened, is pretty average, right? This is what the world looked like at the time. We had about 9,500 new entities that had registered during that year. Let's fast forward a couple of years, 2022, pretty big jump, right? And this is what nearly every state across the country was seeing. You'll see a lot of these are still active. There's not a whole lot that started and then said, never mind, pandemic's over, I'm not going to worry about this anymore. Same for last year. You can see that our numbers are way up. We're registering way more businesses than we were even 5 years ago. It is a new trend, one we expect to continue for some time. It means that our staff is working hard to maintain our really tight turnaround time for registering businesses and filing corporate documents. But this tool is so great to really get a sense of what has been going on, right? Look at the difference in numbers here between the types of entities that are forming. You can see far and away, right? We had about 13,000 new entities registered. Almost all of them were LLCs. So this tells us we need to provide a lot of information for LLCs, right? We need to be really specific about what an LLC member needs to know. We also need to be mindful of who our customer is, and this kind of tool helps us do that. It also helps other businesses, other support organizations navigate what kind of information they need to brush up on, what kind of resources need to be developed, what kind of funds maybe need to be created to help these types of businesses navigate business ownership, registration, maturation, and growth in the state. Again, I can go through all of these. I can reset, I can compare and contrast, and I can just look at what's going on today if that is what I am interested in. Those are the tools I wanted to show you. I see we have, I think, some questions in the chat that I'm happy to we're happy to go over. If anybody has any other questions, or Jess, if there's anything you want to add, because the Data Hub was one of the first big projects you worked on here. It's done so much for us and for our customers. I think I might have done it justice, but I'm not involved in the back end, the day-to-day, the minutia of cleaning up this data. So if there's anything at all that you want to add, please feel free to do so.
I think you did a great job, Kristen. Thanks so much for the kudos and for stepping us through it so expertly. I can tell you might have done this once or twice before.
I do like talking about this stuff. I don't know if you can tell. I do see a question in the chat that was already responded to. It looks like we're going to work to see if we can get some specific information about how many entities or what types of entities are voluntarily responding to that survey. Not something that is going to be available in here, but certainly something that we can work to get you an answer on.
Yeah, I just did some really rough looking, and it looks like it is right around a third of the for-profits are responding to the survey. And actually, just a point of clarification on that, this is the last, what I do is I keep the last time someone responded. So and that's a way to try to get as much survey responses as we possibly can. So if it was 2022 response, then we sort of add that to the 2023. Mostly it's 2023s, but for the few stragglers, I've got a little bit of older information, but it's the last information we have for them. So you have to imagine it's very similar. Same thing with the nonprofits. It could be a few years outdated, but it's nice to have it all aggregated because the questions don't change. It looks like nonprofits, it's probably 2 or 3/4 respond, I think, around roughly. So, and that actually makes a lot of sense to me because I mean, this is going to be anecdotal, but I would imagine that more nonprofit leaders are doing the filing themselves. And so might have more intimate knowledge or perhaps wanting to respond that way. So, but
yeah, and I'll add to that it's also most nonprofits, especially if they have become a tax exempt entity, they're really accustomed to reporting this kind of information to government entities for public consumption, right? They're filing a 990 with the IRS saying how much money they brought in, how much they expended, and in what categories. It doesn't feel as personal, doesn't feel as scary to report that information. It's just a normal course of business. I think that feeds into the urge for nonprofits to report out on this information more frequently than a for-profit business would.
And I think that's right. I think you're right. They rely on, Kathleen is adding that she thinks it's because they rely on surveys so much, and that's absolutely true. So people understand the value of contributing to providing public information publicly that way. It's a really great point. Us too. She says she's a survey nerd. So us too. So I have one final question for Kristen before we wrap up, if no one else has any other questions, is that, so we're here because of Sunshine Week. And I think, you talked a lot throughout this past 50 minutes about how this is all about making information public and transparent. So I just wanted to give you another opportunity to talk about what it really means to be showing this during Sunshine Week.
Yeah, I love Sunshine Week. I think a lot of what we do in the business services division is collecting data and then trying to make that data useful. And I think that's in the spirit of Sunshine Week, right? For centuries, we have had an open records policy here. Everything filed with us is a public record that is free and available to the public. Absolutely. But the onus of a customer or a user, a Rhode Islander, a policymaker, a reporter having to go through those hundreds of thousands of records to try to figure out a pretty basic answer to a pretty basic question, right? What are these businesses doing? Where are they? How can we use this data to make starting a business or nonprofit or operating a business or nonprofit easier, clearer? How can we make clear that we don't just want to be an in and out filing cabinet, right? We're going to take your paper in, and if you want it, you can get it. But also, how can we take this information and make it useful? That's what Sunshine Week is all about, right? I don't think most of government, unless it's statutorily required, is thinking about how can I hide all this information. But there's a big difference between making individual documents, individual pieces of information available, and compiling it in a way that speaks to the needs of users of that data, right? And that's, to me, what Sunshine Week is all about. It's about thinking about the user's experience. It's thinking about how can we take this thing that we are already doing and make it simpler for the people that are going to get some use out of it. And I really think that while the corporate database is so extremely useful if you are interested in a certain entity, it is wonderful, it's transparent, it gets you the information you need. We take further steps to tell you if we don't have the information you need, like an owner or something about a license that that business should have, where you go to find that. But if you are interested in businesses as a whole, if you're interested in the economy as a whole, if you're interested in the nonprofit landscape as a whole, there's no way to do that without something like this that compiles that data and makes it available for you to do what you'd like with it. We are not telling you how to use this. We are guessing this is the most useful way to use that data, but we're always open for suggestions if there are ways that we can make the data we collect more useful for business owners, for nonprofit boards, for business support organizations, for good governance groups, for reporters, for policymakers, for legislators. Any way that we can help support the health of Rhode Island's economy, we'd love to do it as long as statute allows. And this has been a way for us to do this without overextending our authority as a registry for businesses.
Wow, Kristen, I couldn't say it better myself. And I think that's a fantastic way to wrap up this week's series. You hit the nail on the head so many times with this is about transparency. It's about providing this information in a consolidated way that, sometimes it's hard to imagine what folks want, but we're providing that information as a way to people start explore, start asking questions, and hopefully come up with some solutions and answers. So thanks so much. And I think all of us at the Department of State over the past week, just want to say thank you to you for being with us through Sunshine Week. We really appreciate the opportunity to provide this to the public. And we hope you come to us with questions and come explore the tools that we have. So thanks so much to everyone, and we'll talk soon.